Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Erin. We're
Thank
getting
you.
started with our 2025 series. I already had one with Dr. Eddie last week, but this is the first live Q&A. I want to point out tomorrow, so if you're joining live or watching this early, on January 7th, we have a new Betrayed Partner work group starting. I
Tomorrow.
added a couple extra spots because it was full, and so I added a couple extra spots. And then the Sex Addiction 101 work group starts on the 10th. Those are available. You'll see them on our Seeking Integrity site under the work group tab separately. There's an Empowered Women's Retreat starting January 24th. I think there's still spots for that. Is there not? No, I
It's
did not know
not.
that. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry. Oh,
it's
good
okay.
enough.
We're full, but the following one is in April.
Okay, good to know.
Yep.
I was not aware. So yeah, good to know. I'm glad it's all full. But yeah, plan on April. That's on our website as well. So if you're coming through the holidays and going, gosh, we need some help, we've got some help. And we
Absolutely.
don't have questions yet. So please, somebody type in questions. So thoughts, how did the holidays go? We had guys in our residential treatment program. They're
Yeah,
starting 2025 on a very different path, aren't they?
absolutely. And I've always been surprised over the years that the holidays tend to be a busier time for us. And if it's not the holidays, it's like right after. And I think it's just the holidays bring to light family dynamics, spending more time together. And when there's pain in a family system, it's not so much that we all want to just put on a happy face and pretend that, everything's okay. And so for betrayed partners, oftentimes they're like, please go. Um, I don't care if you're here around the holidays. And for a lot of our clients, they have a little bit more flexibility with work, being able to take time off around the holidays. So we're busy. Yeah, we don't close down around Christmas or New
I
Year
always say,
or
yeah, addiction
Hanukkah.
doesn't take a break, and neither do we. So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Erin, we've got a question. Yay. Betrayed partner here, 3 months since D-Day. Addict is in recovery and 12-step has a CSAP. What is the best way to navigate in-home separation when you have 4 children under 10? I think an out-of-home separation would be better, but because of the kids, in-home is probably better. You can speak. She's got 3 little kids, younger kids. Well, little. So,
Yeah. I have 3 boys under 6 and also navigated this. So I'll tell you that in-home separations are challenging. They're doable. We've had couples that have navigated being able to respect the boundaries of an in-home separation, which is, yes, we're under the same roof. We're in separate bedrooms. There's certain times that we like maybe check in or don't. But that essentially our communication is based on what are the children doing, who's going to be going where, when, co-parenting essentially. And that during that time, I think the most important thing, whether it's in home or out of home, the purpose of a separation at all, unless the purpose is like just we're totally done, we're separating because we're moving towards divorce. The purpose of a therapeutic separation is to have goals so that that time spent apart isn't just time apart, that both parties are engaging in individual and collective goals that bring you to wherever that destination is that you want to be so that you can decide, do we want to reunite? Do we want to move further apart? So for in-home, I think it's important that if the goal is, hey, we just need time to navigate this. D-Day was 3 months ago. So really new still. You're still reeling from all the feelings. He's still very much stuck in shame. He's, thank God, is taking some good steps in the right direction. But for in-home separation, obviously separate living quarters. I would have boundaries around those separate living quarters so that if you're in the master, it's not just like, oh, sorry, I need to come like barge in because I forgot my deodorant in your bathroom, right? That you have boundaries around those living quarters so that it does feel like you have a safe place to be really separate. Another thing would be topics of discussion. Just because we're in the same vicinity of each other does not mean that because you had a thought, a feeling, or whatever, that you're just going to like dump that on me, and that the two of you actually make that clear, across both parties. You would have scheduled check-ins. So if that's we're doing a Thanos check-in, if we're doing I like to do a once a week relationship board meeting. If you would like more information on that, you can email me. Yeah, so that there's actual predictable times that we're actually checking in. You can institute something too, like a couples journal. I recommend this for couples that are newly on this path from betrayal and addiction anyways, but especially in a in-home separation, to be able to communicate with each other in a way that has space and time for you to think about it, process it, and respond. And same with the addict, to think about it, process, and respond. It opens up more dialogue for those verbal check-ins and those times where you are actually talking. But I think the biggest thing is to sit down and say, we have to draw out what boundaries look like for this. I recommend leaning on your CSAT for that. They have some great suggestions, because it is hard. That's the whole thing with separation. When you're out of the home, it's like out of sight, out of mind. This is my space. I'm able to like freely wander about. When you're in the same home, that energy pull from one another is still there because you're really around each other. We've seen some couples that when they have young kids, what they do is they still do an out of home separation, but the parent is the one that leaves the home. So like mom is there for these days, and dad is there for these days, but the kids never have to leave their home. But I understand, 4 under 10, it's heartbreaking. It is, because the truth is they will remember this. Your older ones will remember this. And you want to know that you both navigated it in the way that is the most supportive, most developmentally appropriate for your kids. Because these things are felt in family systems. They feel the tension between mom and dad. And so ultimately, I would just say, meet with the CSAT, lay out very clear boundaries. And what happens if those boundaries are not followed, right? That maybe we're trying in home first for the sake of the kids, but if you can't respect my boundaries, we may have to move to out of house and go to plan B. So that would be my suggestion, is just be clear about your boundaries, stick to those no matter how hard it is. And yeah, have quantified goals so that it's like at the end of this separation, where do we want to be? What do we want to know about each other? What will I have wanted to see from you? What are my expectations? How are we going to work on the things that are the issues so that in the end, we're better for this time in separation, not worse?
You mentioned, at the time, and I think it's really clear, or it's important to have a set time frame where there is specific goals, because, and I know you hear this too, it's like, we've been separated for a year or 2 years or whatever, to me, a shorter period of time, kind of putting the relationship in safe harbor while we navigate these and see if there's forward action, and then we can always add on, but that there's a plan, because I think too often it's a separation but there's no plan. And you were really specific, and this person mentions that the addict partner has a CSAT. I would really encourage you to make
Yeah.
sure that you've got support for you with all of this,
Yes.
so that there's also someone who's helping you think of what your boundaries are, and how that will best help you, you know for yourself, but also, as a parent and everything else as well. So that would be another encouragement. Make sure you're getting support for you, along this. And it's different. I know there's a lot of partners that go, I don't need a therapist. It's his. I'm like, this is like really big wounds and not getting support. It's very different, modalities of therapy, for betrayal trauma than it is for addiction work and accountability and all of those
Yeah.
type of things. So getting the right help for each and both of you. I always think you want to have the best opportunity for success. And clearly, you've got kids. When Even if the worst happened and you were not able to navigate this, you will always co-parent. And I tell people, and then you'll co-grandparent. You want to do it with integrity, and like Erin said, making sure that you're not leaving a detrimental mark on the kids, but that they see that you guys were working towards,
Yes.
healing and benefit for them. So
Yeah. Because it's true. Yes. And you're right. We hear this all the time. It's like, well, why do I need therapy? This is his problem. It's not about fixing you. It's about helping you walk through this hellstorm of fire and get to the other side with coping skills, with support, with processing the trauma. And we always say, it's like, yeah, you didn't cause this, you didn't create this, you didn't ask for this, and yet here it is. And what are you going to do to get from this day forward? And I think the thing too with having young kids is this, as much as we don't want to admit it, it dramatically impacts our ability to be present with our kids. It dramatically impacts our ability to mother. Um, and that's devastating, right? When you are heartbroken, when you are stuck in trauma, it's really difficult to show up with the same fun, playful spirit that you normally would have with your kids when you're just trying to survive. And so I would say that getting that extra support helped me be a better mother, helped me be able to be present at work, and yes, in the relationship as well, I learned tools to help regulate triggers and regulate, big emotions that came up. So it isn't about this being your fault. It's about how are you going to get from this day to the next.
The next one, where can I find the relationship board meeting? Sounds interesting.
It is interesting. It is not like available, so it's not out there in a book or something. We should put it in one of our next
I was going to
ones.
say it should be, but there's
But it's a tool I created that we use with our couples. It is a once a week sit down, hour-long check-in that is really about looking at the week we just had and looking at the week we have ahead of us. And I think it's good because sometimes daily check-ins are too much for couples that are very, very new in this process of healing, and others can handle it great. But the board meeting goes everything from, how is recovery? How is our communication? What do I wish that I did better? Like there's a lot of questions about, okay, let's evaluate the week we just had and let's plan for the week we're about to embark on. At what point do we want to add in a date night? What chores or family events do we have? When do you have therapy? When do I have therapy? So just getting on the same page, and it helps to make kind of metered progress forward in a way that's not yeah. So if you want to email me, Erin at seekingintegrity.com, I'm happy to send a copy to you, a template that you can make your own. Yeah.
well, and I think, when you call it a board meeting, I
Yeah.
think that helps because it takes, like, then we're coming with our intelligent brains, our thinking brains to talk about, decisions that need to be made. It's like, our life is the company, and we're looking at it from that standpoint rather than, all of the, just the raw emotion. So I think it helps,
Totally.
have the right framework. So,
And I always
go ahead.
throw this little spin in there, which is, we all have masculine and feminine energy inside of us, right? So that's not necessarily about gender. It's about the type of energy, right? When I'm in my masculine, I am planning, I am working, I am scheduling, I have all the balls in the air. When I'm in my feminine, I am more creative, spontaneous, feeling. And so I always ask for this particular board meeting for that 1 hour that the addict is embodying his masculine energy and holding this space, that it is his responsibility to make the time, hold it sacred, show up and lead the meeting. And that for just that 1 hour, that the betrayed partner would embody more of her feminine energy, which she typically can't embody because her guard's up all the time. And I don't blame her for that, but being able to just say, I am going to trust you to lead for just this 1 hour. And I'm not going to think about it. You're leading, and I'm just going to follow. And it gives the ability to just try this on, as it's something that most of our betrayed partners talk about, is like, I actually, more than anything, I just want him to be the rock for once. I want him to make decisions. I want him to worry about the doctor's appointments. I want him to carry some of the mental load, and for her to feel safe enough that she actually could surrender into his arms every now and again. That we have a lot of women who express that. And so it's just a way to try that on and practice that. So that's a little aside for what I usually bring along with the board meeting.
Okay. The next question, PA spouse here. D-Day was 9 months ago. My wife is struggling with some aspects of my acting out. She wants to know how her story works in light of them. I'm still learning about my story. IFS work with a CSAT, so I'm struggling to give her my story so she can work it into hers. We're also in couples with a CSAT and I'm working my steps. How can I support her through this?
I'm confused. PA spouse here. Porn addict
So
spouse.
the addict spouse, the porn addict spouse, and my wife is struggling with some aspects of my acting out. She wants to know how her story works in light of them. So it feels like she wants to know more gory details, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So,
Okay. So I'm still learning my story. IFS is great. Love that. And love that you're able to do IFS work with your CSAT too.
mhm.
I'm struggling to give her my story so that she can work it into hers. Well, I think sometimes in all honesty, we have to go through the work first. Um, you certainly can share about, because a lot of partners do want to know, like, where did this start? Like, what aspects of your child, and not in the sense of like they want an excuse, right? Because I think a lot of partners feel like their the childhood trauma is being used as like a weapon and being like, don't you see what I've been through? That's why I'm like this. And it's like, no, it's a reason. It is not an excuse because you're a grown adult and you can go and do the work on this. But I also think for many of our clients, this is like learning a new language. Some of them come in often. I get in the intake and I'm going over childhood trauma, which I don't even say childhood trauma. I say, was there anything about your childhood that was unhelpful or dysfunctional or maybe challenging? Because almost all of them are like, no, things were great. And then they come in and they start kind of like peeling back the layers of their story. And that's that discovery process of like learning that inner child inside of you has maybe been through some things that set us up to be where we are now. And they had no idea. I mean, to each of us, our childhood was normal to us, right? I mean, until you are old enough to learn that you look around at other families and you're like, wait, their mom's not like that, or their dad's not like that, or I feel safer at their house, or you start to have those mirroring effects of society kind of showing you. But I think in this, you can only share what it is. You are uncovering and working with somebody. IFS is going to be incredibly, helpful at learning the different parts of yourself and how they interact. But that's all you can share, right? Is this is what I'm learning. This is what's coming up for me. This is where I'm trying to draw conclusions and put the dots together. But that I don't yet have all the answers, you know? And so I think sometimes that's vulnerable in itself, is to say, I don't know how my story works in, collaboration with your story. I don't know all the answers yet, but I'm on the path to figuring that out. I'm peeling back the layers, and here's one layer I'd like to share with you. I uncovered this with my CSAT, and I want to share it with you. You don't always have all the answers. And I think in terms of the other partner being supportive, not drawing conclusions for your partner, right? So it might be really obvious to you that their family was, messed up. And when they're in the process of therapy, sometimes the most powerful conclusion is the one you come to on your own. And I, even as a therapist, I have to bite my tongue sometimes because it's clear to me. I could be like, well, can't you tell you're a mess with your mother? And you're like, look, at dad was absent. And I would just want to spew that. And they're not ready for it. And quite frankly, me telling them, they pull away and they're like, you don't get it. You weren't there. I have to like listen and guide and get there eventually where they are able to see their own story for what it is. So not drawing all the conclusions, bringing all the solutions, but just being listening ear. You can make gentle reflections like, wow, that must have been really hard as a kid. I didn't have that same experience. And I can imagine if I did, it would be really challenging for me. Yeah.
So I have a couple questions for you, but I noted in the chat, the going deeper, that's the inner
Mhm.
child work with Dr. Eddie Caparucci, that
It's so
he's only
good.
going to offer this twice a year. So this would be an opportunity. It starts this month. I would highly encourage you to consider that. I think that would help. But Erin, I was thinking, about, it feels like, maybe I'm misreading this, but it feels like I want you to know your story, and because then you're going to help me, and all these puzzle pieces are going to fit together. And what you're talking about is the journey, and it really is a journey. And we can continue to have new insights and awakenings. There, I know part of it is a safety thing. Like, if I
Mm.
understand all your story and then I understand mine, oh, okay, then whew, we're good. And it's way less clear than that. And so part of this is trusting the process, and the more you learn, and there's also, like you said, Erin, like, I want to tell them because I see all of this stuff and they're not ready for it. And that's exactly right. This recovery journey is, there's stuff I've learned, in the last few years that I could not have, even approached early on my journey. And so the gift of recovery is that it's a journey, and it continues to unfold. And that's actually a gift. And it doesn't sound like it if you want to know all the answers and you want it now, but it really is, because then it's like, okay, now I'm able to take this in, and oh, that makes sense. So it is a journey, but please consider the going deeper. I also put the betrayed partner, I mentioned it earlier, that starts tomorrow. And if you're a partner that's newer on this journey, even not as new, that is so good. We talk about boundaries and all of these things, communication. How do we do this stuff? Angela Spearman does a fantastic job. Those are both, and then, like I said, Sex Addiction 101 is also on that link too. So, okay, next question. How do if oh, how do I know if I'm verging on codependent with my sex addict partner? We'll get there. We're 5 months post D-Day, and I'm really trying hard to have an outside support system, but I'm worried I might be too emotionally dependent and sometimes maybe a bit too warm towards him. What are some warning signs for myself to look out that I'm too enmeshed?
Yeah. So at Seeking Integrity, right? We don't like the word codependent, and here's why. And I think you'll appreciate this. Codependence is a label that comes with a lot of negative connotations, right? And so many of our partners that have come into our circle have been labeled as codependent. And especially when we're in this phase of like crisis, right? You're 5 months post D-Day of learning that your life was not what you thought it was. For me to tell you you're codependent is like, well, what's wrong with you? Where'd you learn that? How did you, which is, look, down the line doing, you know, work on your own childhood and your own emotional needs and how you may be wound up with who you're with is totally fine. But right now, we always say we're in like crisis mode, right? And so we use what's called pro-dependence, right? Where the whole premise is to say, of course you love him. Of course you're worried about him, you know? And of course, you're also trying to figure out, where do I end and he begin? What do boundaries look like? What does a healthy intimacy look like? But here at Seeking Integrity, we will never shame somebody for loving someone who is addicted or sick. And we are always looking at how to move somebody towards healthier relationships. But we're never going to look at you and say, you know what happened to you as a child that you're here loving this man? Like, what did you call into this relationship? Or let's, here's his behavior and let's point out yours. You probably caused some of this. We're never going to do that. That's blaming, that's shaming. And even the label codependent or co-addict, as they've called it, is incredibly shaming to someone who has just tried to love their partner the best they know how, right? You wouldn't do that to somebody whose husband was in the hospital with cancer. You wouldn't do that to somebody, who was struggling with, after an accident or an injury, that you sacrificed parts of yourself to be there for that person. People would applaud you. Wow, what an angel. Look how she's caring for him. But the second it's addiction, man, do they go after the people that love that person. And so Codependence is an amazing book Dr. Rob wrote. We come from a codependent lens. So that's just like the foundation. Okay. But what I will say about what you're experiencing, couple of things. So one is trying hard to have a outside support system. That's huge. And that's wonderful that you're seeking that, right? And that's friends, that's a therapist, that's potentially a group. Like the Betrayed Partner Work Group is an amazing way to meet friends. And, this is not an area that's super easy to share about with just anybody, because people form their opinions and they either want you to stay or go, or and they don't let it go. And then anyways, it's, for many betrayed partners, it feels really private and personal and hard to share. So being in a community of women that do get this and will support you is key. And then you said, I'm a bit too emotionally dependent and sometimes maybe too warm towards him. What are some of the warning signs? So here's what I would say for warning signs. Okay. And this is between you and you. This is not in any way to blame or shame. This is like questions to ask within yourself. Do I abandon myself before I'm willing to abandon him? Right? Do I set boundaries and I walk them back because I'm afraid of how they're going to make him feel? Right? Or I'm afraid that it's going to push him further away. And all I would say is that in those moments, right, that part of what's happening is that you love this person. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want to harm them. You don't want to push them further away. You care about them, but also making sure you're not abandoning yourself in the process. And sometimes the best ways of doing that is to begin to create an anchor of safety within yourself. And boundaries are the way to do that, right? Boundaries are the way to say, how am I spiritually safe, sexually safe, financially safe, emotionally safe? And having other women around you that are going through this is a wonderful way to have little mirrors around you that are like, hey, in this particular case, he's taking advantage, right? He's walking all over the boundary and you're not holding the boundary. And I always say the most important boundaries are your internal boundaries, the boundaries that you have with yourself. That if he does this, this is what I need to do for me. That I'm going to take space. I'm going to get away. I'm going to get safe within myself. I'm going to reach out to a friend. I'm going to take a bath. I'm going to meditate, whatever it is. So I'm just throwing that out there because I don't want you to shame yourself. This whole thing is incredibly disorienting and you're 5 months in, and it may be a minute before you feel like you're on solid ground again. But in this process, you can take baby steps to begin to feel like you are your safe person, that you have your own back, and that you're making decisions that are in alignment with what you actually want. Not out of fear of what he'll do or what will happen to him, because at the end of the day, he's going to do what he's going to do. You do have to protect yourself and you do have to take care of yourself in this process.
I agree with all that. We're going to have a boundary work group starting towards the end of February with Debbie
Oh,
McCree, and she's
yay.
great. Yes, so that will be,
She's
there'll
the
be
boundary
two different parts.
queen.
She's like, she can spout off an internal boundary faster than you can. I have to think about the different parts, so, but what I was thinking too when I read this is like that I'm too enmeshed. I hear this like self-shaming language, in Dr. Robbins' book, and there's a podcast on it. It's not as comprehensive as the book, but it'd be a starting point on sex, love, and addiction podcast. Dr. Rob has done, I think, a couple of different podcasts on codependence, but like rather than saying you're enmeshed, maybe it's like you're just deeply involved. I love in the book, there's like, instead of saying this, he's got a reframe for for how you're showing up, and this is about healing and healthy attachments. And if you're like, it feels like, and I'm just reading this, but it feels like you're so concerned about your behaviors and that you're doing things that are like, get the support. Please join that Betrayed Partner Work Group that starts tomorrow. She talks about boundaries there too, but like, I think you would find the support, and you don't have to be friends with any of them, but it can also be peer support. It can be just like another person to connect with, or not. Everybody gets to choose their level of involvement. It's done via Zoom, but it really is a safe space. Angela, again, does a great job with those. So check that out. And to the next one, can you give me examples of boundaries for me? The betrayed partner spouse just moved out. And one of the reasons why we're having these courses is because boundaries, like, like with alcoholism, abstinence is sobriety, and it's more cut and dried, and all of this is so much more complicated. So there are some basic ones, and Eric can talk about that, but everything needs to be individualized for you for safety, and it's not about control or punishment, but there's some good starting spots. So Erin.
Yeah. Well, I think the first place to start is like your non-negotiable boundaries, right? If you have any, right? And those would be the ones that are like, hey, this is my line in the sand. And for some, that's like, if you ever act out with an escort again, any sex outside of our marriage, if like you get to make those up, but where you have to really decide in yourself, like, is there anything that could happen that would be a deal breaker for me? Like this, we're done. Okay. Then there's all kinds of shades of in between, right? Which could be, and I would say the punishment should fit the crime, right? Meaning, like, if you're somebody would say, well, if you lie to me, divorce. Well, we know that all humans experience times where they lie, right? So just being careful that what boundaries you're setting, you actually can walk out whatever that consequence is. And so I would say certain boundaries would be, you know, if you act out in this way, right, then I'm going to do what action am I going to take? This is not about then you're going to go do X, Y, and Z. It's like, I'm going to boundaries give me the ability to safely connect to you. And if I'm not safe, the consequences, I'm going to be moving away in a certain, whether that's emotionally, physically, sexually, interaction with you, whatever it is. So yeah, boundaries around lying. Sure. You can have boundaries around lying. We like to put in like a 24-hour grace period because that allows recovery to do the job, right? Because a lot of our guys have compulsive lying issues and they can lie about pretty much anything. But that's a very old pattern for them that started in childhood about not losing love, saying the right thing, not the authentic thing. And so the 24 hours gives them a chance for their brain to come online, their prefrontal cortex, and for them to actually do the right thing, which is it's a grace period. So some will use that if you lie and you don't clean it up with me within 24 hours, then, I'm going to choose to not communicate with you until our next, CSAP appointment, whatever. Around acting out, you have to decide what is the acting out, what is your level of comfort with it, and what is non-negotiable for you. And your consequence is going to be based on what you're willing and able to do based on that behavior. I think there's ones around just general, like, look, you don't even have to have evidence that something is going on in the acting out realm. You simply could set a boundary because their general demeanor and way of being with you is suspicious. It doesn't feel right. Your boundary could simply be, when I don't feel safe, I'm going to take space. I'm going to do some self-care. I'm going to leave the house, or I'm going to make a call to a friend, or I need 24 hours just to regulate myself. That's a boundary. It's saying that, and it's not even saying you did this. It's just saying, hey, the person that's in front of me right now, I don't feel safe within myself. Whether it's defensiveness, manipulation, gaslighting, anger, being mean, whatever it is, not taking accountability, you can set a boundary with that simply by saying, when I don't feel safe, I'm going to take myself out of the situation and I'm going to go get safe. Because if that's not with you, I got to find safety within myself and with others. Yeah. And now for somebody who spouse just moved out, you could have boundaries around coming to the house, right? Do they still have a key? Can they just waltz in when they want? Can they just stop by unannounced? What type of communication do you want to have? Are we checking in every day? Phone call in the morning because I'm better in the morning, or one at night? Is texting okay? Like there's really space for boundaries all over the place. Boundaries around money and transparency around money. Boundaries around, how you want to spend your time, if at all. You can have expectations for what their recovery could look like. And you can say, not saying you have to do X, Y, and Z and like all of these things, but saying it would make me feel safe if you're in active recovery, and active recovery is defined by these things, right? So there's a plethora of options for boundaries. I recently read the book Boundary Boss, and it's an incredible book. It's particularly for high functioning women, which I thought was great because that defines me. I can be, super on the go, productive, but like, and I thought I'd learned everything there is to learn about boundaries. And turns out there's lots more to learn for me. So it's a great option. There's lots of great books out there around boundaries, but just as a way to explore those for sure. And definitely anything Debbie McRae does, do it, because she does our boundaries workshop at our empowered women's retreats. But just her webinars, she gives such practical, easy to follow ideas, plans, tools that help you to start your boundary journey.
So two things I want to tie into. You talked about there's always more to learn, and I think that's always true.
Yep.
But I'm pointing that out because it isn't A, one and done, or B, I failed because it didn't. No, like, please understand that this is a journey. Some things are going to work better than others. The other thing you mentioned was talking about being regulated. And you have shared in previous webinars too how important it was for you to work on being regulated, and your boundaries help you be regulated.
Yeah.
Your boundaries create that safe space. You talked about, I need to do this to go, do self-care. Self-care is part of regulating. So whatever it is that needs to happen so that you can show up for yourself, and hold the boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is, I'm a porn addict. Did my formal disclosure today, going out of the country for a month with limited access to the internet, planning on bringing the Out of the Doghouse books to help me with my addiction. Do you have any other ideas that I could do?
In terms of reading,
Well, I was like, no internet. So I was like, yeah, yeah.
probably. Yeah, there's well, Porn Addiction 101 just came out this last summer, and Dr. Rob and I co-authored that book, and it's great because if porn is your addiction, it focuses just on digital acting out, strategies, coping skills. Gosh, there's so many. I mean, I would just maybe share the link, Tammy, to our book recommendations, because that would give him kind of
I
more
can
of
do
a
that.
full list. But I also think too, having a plan when you're out of the country, like having a plan for, with no internet, how am I going to connect to, whether it's I need support, I'm triggered, I don't know what to do in this situation, I'm out of my element, that creating, whether that's like regular access to some way to get support would be really important, because travel tends to be a huge trigger for addicts across the board, um, whether they're in or out of the country. And there's a level of freedom. I'm not in my normal routine, adventure, and it's kind of like out the window. And so I would just say, without internet is good for lack of access to porn, but I do want to just make sure that you have access to support if you need it, for sure.
Well, and I'm thinking, and you will need it, like, for all of those reasons. Like, so you know where you're going, check and see where in-person meetings are.
Yeah.
You know,
They're in every country, everywhere.
yes.
Yeah.
And phone calls, make sure you've got your sponsor and therapist on speed dial, so that you can make phone calls. Even if there's not internet, there hopefully is phone access, so that you can touch base, have a plan and have a connection, whatever that is. But and meetings, like, if push comes to shove, honestly, go to an open AA meeting. Like, just go to something that will help. Oh yeah, I remember, I'm an addict in recovery, because they're all over the place. So it's one of those things where making sure you have a plan for how you're going to, and follow it. Like, you calendar it. If this is what I'm going to do on that Tuesday, well, that's where I'm going to be from that time to that time. Okay, and the more you're focusing your brain on those things, you're going from one stepping stone to the next, on a recovery path, the less likely you are to be, it's falling off the bridge. So How
Mhm.
can you tell if you're trauma bonded to your addict or abuser?
So this one's tricky again because we come back from this place of wanting, you know, a I think the best way to know if you're in this place of what I would say almost is reenacting trauma is when there are cycles that are very clear. And neither one of you can break that cycle, right? Intense, like love bombing, intense, you're everything to me. I love you. And in that moment, it's like, God, I need the love, and it will look like an abuse cycle, right? The cycle of abuse, followed by like the honeymoon period, always followed by the exact same behavior and the exact same response. And that it, so, and if that is, a part of your story, right? And you're asking the question. So this would not be something I would put on a betrayed partner, meaning like they're seeking support and help. And I'm like, hey, did you know, your childhood is probably why you're in this relationship? Because let me tell you, that is not always the case. It is the case with some, right? With some, sure, they have childhood trauma and certain types of behaviors is familiar to them that like normal um unconditional love would feel abnormal to them, right? That I know how to exist in a system that is chaotic and where I am fighting for validation and I am fighting for love all the time. That could be part of somebody's story. And so I would say if you're looking at like, how do I know if I'm in some kind of like trauma bonding, trauma reenactment cycle with my partner? You can look at how does this person make me feel? Right? Are we in a cyclical pattern that is just like the same? It's Groundhog's Day. And at the end, I never feel like we're making it anywhere, and B, that I truly feel loved. I truly feel supported. I truly feel because even in the love bombing, it's manipulative, right? And so am I like being manipulated along this whole path and I'm not able to find safety and I'm clinging on to like the breadcrumbs. And that's where I would say this is where you're, yeah, some of our women they get to the place where I've lost myself completely and I don't even know what's up or down anymore. And between the gaslighting, the manipulating, the lying, they start to turn on themselves where I don't even trust my own intuition. I don't even trust that what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing. I don't know anymore. Or this person has like chipped away at their self-worth and their self-esteem and blame shifted so much that they're lost and being able to find healing. And so I would say that that's another example is, do I have self-worth in this relationship? Do I feel like I have a voice that's heard? Does this person respect boundaries? Does this person, is this person, when I'm calling out the behavior, willing to take steps to get help? Saying that, you know what, you matter to me, you're hurting, I need help. You're absolutely right. Or are they continuing to blame shift, lie, cheat, deceive, all of the things. And so those would be some kind of classic examples of what trauma bonding was, specifically with more of a narcissistic type person. But again, addiction is inherently narcissistic. When you're in active addiction, you're not your best self. You don't care about the people around you. You're so compartmentalized that it's just like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do over here. I'll show up for you how I can show up for you. Um, yeah, I hope that's helpful.
It is, and all of this stuff is complex.
It
So
is.
get support for you. This next one seems like the success rate for recovery from this addiction is very low. Why aren't you telling partners to run? Has this become too much of a business? So I just posted the a blog on a series of webinars that we did that said, should I stay or should I go? Each person makes this decision. I have a minor in stats. I love stats, and when you're saying, oh, the success rate, so yes, on a global basis, addiction in general, it's not just this, it's every form of compulsive behaviors, whether it's substances or gambling, gaming, whatever, or sex or porn addiction. Yeah, denial is I'm lying to myself. I'm telling myself that this time it's going to be different. And that's very difficult to, intervene on, but not impossible. I know I've been in recovery for quite a while, and I know many, many, many people that are as well. So, and I know lots of people who start and get, oh yeah, this is great, and then they fall off. But check out that blog on Should I Stay or Should I Go? It was a series. Kristen Snowden did one, and she had 10 questions to ask. Including, do I even like this person? Do I, so I just thought it was really helpful. The next one was a partner who stayed, a partner who left. And just like getting rid of the addict doesn't get rid of the grief and loss and everything else. There's still a process for healing for a partner. The third one was a mediator, Deborah Doak, who does mediation within the sex addiction arena. So she had a lot of great information. And then the last one was our COO, who is also, he's a mental health professional and an attorney, which is an unusual combination. But he did a great job of going like, if you expect the legal system to help you on an emotional basis, that's not what it's set up for. Those are all, it's just useful. Everybody stays or goes based on what they choose to do. There's no right or wrong. We're not judging anyone, and everybody gets to choose their path. But is it a
And
business? Yeah,
no, I was
that's
going
not
to
why
say
we're in
like,
it. Go ahead.
no, no, yeah, this is a tough one. And people ask a lot because they want a surety, right? But I always say, even if we had a hard and fast statistic, right? Sex addiction is not abstinence from like, it's like alcoholism, don't drink alcohol. Sex addiction or any process addiction is not about elimination of that thing, right? It is about healthy associations with this thing. And so it's even harder to navigate. But then on top of that, I go to, there's so many layers for each person. I could say, oh, these 5 people, stayed sober. Are we telling the truth? Are we not telling the truth? But then we have, what mental health challenges do they have? Do they have co-occurring substance use? Do they have childhood trauma? What type of work are they doing to get better? What does recovery look like? I mean, there's so many layers to, do they have a personality disorder? I mean, there's all kinds of layers to this that even accurate statistics would be very challenging to come by, but there's not a whole lot out there. Um, and no, has this become too much of a business? No, that's not it, because we are actually, I think there's a lot of resources out there that actually do judge you for staying and do judge you for going. There's a lot for betrayed partners, especially. It's like, join our group if you're leaving, join our group if you're staying. We don't care if you stay or go. We want the healthiest and best version of you. Do we believe recovery is possible? Absolutely. I judge our success rate based on the giant alumni, healthy alumni group we have of men that are still coming back years later, and their marriages. We've had guys that got served divorce papers in treatment that have healthy, successful marriages years later, moving down a different path. We hear those stories all the time. Do we hear the guys that don't stay sober? Absolutely. You know what the difference is? They did not do the work. They literally did not follow their aftercare plan from the minute they walked out the door. They 30 days later, I don't need any of this stuff anymore. So it is challenging, because partners want to know, but even if you knew, your partner's not a number, they're not going to be with or for or against. It really is what is going on with them and what are they willing to do.
Yeah, willingness is the key to all of this. And I was thinking, you are joining this on a free basis. There is a cost to our business for this. So if we were doing this just for a business, this would not be a good investment. Separately,
Well,
those
half
low
of what we
cost,
do is free.
yeah.
Look,
And the low
there's
cost work groups, $395 for a live facilitated 6-week course. Like they're not just watch a video and what, like it's like there's someone there teaching and interacting and answering questions, you know, for 6 weeks, you know, that's a great value, you know. And then yes, there's expert treatment, and that is
But
a
even our
whole different
expert
realm.
treatment, we have 8 clients on
Right.
purpose. If we wanted to just like bring in the big bucks, we could scale up to, you know, being just massive. But we know that knowing our clients individually, because they are not the same, and providing them treatment that is like helping them specifically get on a path is important, you know? So I know those comments hurt our feelings. All right.
And here's the deal. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. We're
Yes, of
going to just
course.
keep doing the work. So, okay,
Yes.
I'm the betraying spouse. I am a recent alumni of Seeking Integrity. Do you have any helpful input for me, who is highly emotional person and recently diagnosed with high functioning ASD? My wife and I are partners in a long-term marriage. We both have been working hard with our CSATs. Both are in 12-step recovery programs and have good communications. We both are also working to keep our emotions in check as we go through our disclosure next week for my betrayed spouse. I want to provide my best possible revealing of my history and acting out so that she can know all my truths during disclosure without getting super emotional.
Okay. I am a recent alumni of Seeking. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, emotion is sometimes not within our control. And I know what you're asking, how can I share all of this to my partner without basically taking the spotlight off of her ability to have emotion because I'm so emotional that I can't hold the space, you know? Um, First of all, for anyone that's dealing with sex addiction and autism spectrum disorder, Candace Christensen is a phenomenal resource for anyone out there that is looking to be assessed for ASD.
She's going to do a webinar on she's going to do a special edition webinar on our series. So
That's wonderful.
yes, I'm going to go double check the date so I don't say the wrong one, but she's going to be joining. So join then too, but please, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, she does training for our staff because we have a lot of clients that are potentially on the spectrum. You know, I'm an autism mama, and I love how she celebrates neurodifference. So I'm just throwing that out there. She's an amazing human being. You can find her online. But anyway, so for this, I would say, you know, I get this, that not wanting to be overtly emotional so that my partner has the space to have her feelings. I would say don't cut your emotions off, right? But, you know, one way of helping you in this process is to really like breathe into your spine and just imagine like you are holding out a container, that I'm here today to hold my partner's emotions, right? That I'm putting out my hands so that I can be a rock for her in this moment because this is painful for her. And while I have shame and I have sadness and I feel when she feels, that's all okay. But you do want to allow, you know, her the space to have some emotions as she's the one getting this painful information. And so I would just say, like, breathing into your spine, put on your, you know, your warrior gear, and just imagine holding out a container where her emotions are going in and her words are going in there, and that you're holding them versus them going here. Because oftentimes, and this is good for anyone that's addicts especially, but when you are in confrontations, difficult arguments, like one thing that betrayed partners often bring up is not just the defensiveness, but like the victimhood, that the addict goes into their own shame and their own spiral, and now they don't have an opportunity to even share their feelings because the addict's already laying on the ground. What am I going to do? Kick him while he's down, you know? But they don't feel like they have anywhere for their emotions to go. So really just breathe into it and put out your emotional container, right? And just say, I'm going to allow those things to come in here. I'm going to maintain connection with her, and I'm going to allow for, you know, her to have this moment of having feelings and being held in her feelings. Um, you may be emotional and you may not be able to cut that off completely, and that's okay. Um, but it is the part of where I'm so emotional that she doesn't get to have emotions.
And And I'm sure your CSATs will both help you, guide through that process. Okay, the next one. Boundaries don't work for narcissists. Aren't you putting too much pressure on partners who are sometimes in a no-win situation?
Well, you're correct, right? So, and not narcissistic traits, okay? I think our society has blown up the term narcissism, and now everyone's a narcissist, right? Boundaries don't work with narcissistic personality disorder, okay? In which case, you would be best to what I can live with, I need to live with, or I need to move on. And I need to do that in a way that is very safe and calculated to protect myself on the way out the door, right? That being said, boundaries are not meant to control somebody else. They're also not meant to change their behavior. Your boundaries are meant to protect yourself. And so when we're talking about boundaries here, I'm not saying, you need to put up these big blocks so that they do something. It's about what am I going to do to protect myself? And absolutely, even with someone with narcissistic personality disorder, you absolutely have to have boundaries, whether you verbalize them or not, right? Whether you communicate them or not, you have internal boundaries for yourself. How am I going to conduct myself in my own life? And what do I need to do to get safe? So if you're with someone that's not safe, that boundaries have historically just never been something that have been effective at all in the relationship, that data is if you're able to leave and you need to leave, how do I do that safely? How do I do that in a way where I'm able to protect my finances, protect my children, protect, this person from manipulating and controlling the outcome as a way to punish me, right? So no, I don't think we're putting too much pressure on partners. What we're asking partners to do is to get support, which whether you're with an NPD or you're with an active addict that has narcissistic traits, you got to protect yourself. You need to get support. You absolutely have to make decisions for yourself. Um, yeah. So I don't think I agree with you that somebody that boundaries are not even, you just need to take action to protect yourself. You don't need to verbalize the boundary. If it's somebody that like weaponizes those boundaries against you, punishes you, makes it worse for you, then yeah, you're not in a relationship with somebody who's going to move or change. So what do I need to do to get safe is where you're at this point. But either way, all of those are boundaries about protecting you, making decisions to protect you and your sanity.
Yeah, that would be an internal boundary. I'm not going to sacrifice myself for this other person. And, and it's not just sex addicts that have narcissistic traits. It's all addicts because we can't, we can't do our active addiction if we're thinking about someone else. Like those two things don't align. So we have to be self-centered and, to continue that. Okay, next question. I'm a betrayed partner with awesome CSAT. My SAPA husband isn't in recovery after 11 months of therapy with second CSAT. My husband's current CSAT is really bad, and my CSAT agrees. Ooh. Is there anything I can say or do to help him understand he needs a better therapist, or do I stay quiet, stand by my boundaries, and continue focusing on myself?
No, I mean, I definitely think you can share, would you be open to some reflections that I'd like to share with you? And you can say, I have concerns about your therapist for the following reasons, right? Here's kind of this is why I don't feel super supported or safe with you seeing this therapist. And here's what's going on. Would you consider being willing to see somebody else? Right. Yeah. Also, standing by your boundaries and continuing to focus on yourself. But absolutely, you can bring the concern to the table and share about it and talk about why you feel that way. Yeah. Especially if if your CSAT is also saying like, hey, something's off over there. But again, oftentimes as therapists, we hear things through telephone, right? So I would say your CSAT has heard it from you, right? And your perception of the other person sees that, unless they're directly interacting with them. Then, your CSAT could share the concern.
Well, and I'm also going like, and what is the treatment plan? And your CSAT could be talking to, if there's release assigned, there could be, what is the treatment plan? What is the time frame for a formal therapeutic disclosure? What is, like some
Yes.
of those really practical questions could be, useful. And if things aren't, at some point, a healthy boundary, we have lots of guys that come to our residential treatment program because things are like they're stuck. And I don't know which CSATs you have. I'd love to know who you love because that's always helpful for me too. But it's one of those things where, if you're going like in a situation where his therapist is going, well, he's not really ready. Well, what's the plan to get him ready? And that can leave you feeling stuck, which I bet you do, because I'm in this in between and nothing is changing. So yeah, there's a lot of help. I again, we'll go back to the betrayed partner worker that starts tomorrow. Like there's so much good information to support you. Many good therapists recommend those for their clients as well. So do you have time for one more or should we stop?
I don't,
We
because we got to run to
Okay.
basketball evaluations,
Well,
but
there you go. Great
I
questions. The
know.
next one, please email me. I've got some ideas for you, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. I've got some information for you. So anyway,
And next
anybody
time,
email
log on
me.
and throw
Yeah.
your questions in right
Yes.
away.
Yes,
'Cause this always
exactly.
happens.
I know. And it's good stuff. Have fun at basketball. Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.